Wow, kids, I don't really know where to open up with this game. There's so much here to talk about, so much cool shit stacked in layers and layers of creative and interesting gameplay that this video already feels a lot less like I'm doing a review and more like uncovering a precious gem. Of course, every diamond is formed under pressure, and this one has a few strains that keep it from being the truly great experience that I want it to be. But oh man, outside of those few flaws, I haven't been this wowed by a game in a hot minute. Last year, I had two games that left me dumbstruck by how enveloping they were: Vomitorium and Head on Blood Right. Both games were so good, so creative, so ruthlessly absorbing that I gave both of them a 10 out of 10, and they were tied for my personal game of the year. Kingdom of the Dead, from developer Dirigo Games, grabbed me in exactly the same way as those two games did, with its unique aesthetics, presentation, gameplay, and overall design. The setup has a strong hook. We play as Agent Chamberlain, a former professor in the 1800s who's been turned into an army general and assigned to a secret government program called Gatekeeper. Seems as though portals from the underworld have been opened all across the eastern United States, flooding the landscape with all manner of creepy undead and demonic beings. The portals are being opened by the King of the Dead, who, for all intents and purposes, is the fucking Grim Reaper himself, and the chaos and death his underlings are wreaking are giving him power to feed off of. Chamberlain is tasked with tracking down said portals in order to seal them off and stop this secret war for good, but the catch is that the only way to seal them is by using a sword imbued with the spirit of some kind of demon. Chamberlain and the sword have an uneasy alliance as they set off on horseback to track down the portals and stop the invasion of the Kingdom of the Dead.
Roll credits.
The minimalistic story unfolds over the course of 9 missions, which you unlock as you play through them. You'll unlock 2 or 3 at a time depending on which ones you play through, and you can play them in any order as they open up. Each mission is going to have a set of objectives depending on the difficulty. On the easiest, 1-star difficulty, the goal is to just get to the end and close the portal. 2-star difficulty adds in the requirement of finding a secondary objective, which usually ends up being an item of some kind hidden somewhere in the mission. And 3 stars adds the requirement of ensuring that there are no civilian casualties as you go in guns blazing through the countryside. And by guns blazing, I do mean guns fucking blazing. As expected, each difficulty setting affects the volume of creatures you'll have to face in each mission, which really makes a hell of a difference depending on what you pick. Boy, oh boy. But we'll get back to that, kids. Mission setups are pretty simple. Get in, check off objectives, stay alive throughout. Checkpoints in the form of journals comprise the save system, so there's no save scumming to get through this one, kids. You hit the checkpoint to save as you go, and if you die, you head back to the checkpoint and try again. Fortunately, anything you picked up along the way is, mostly saved when you return to the checkpoint, so depending on what you've done and how you've done it, you won't have to do a lot of backtracking if you get ganked. Each mission also has a boss fight at the end that is teased in some way along the way, most of the time at the beginning of the stage, sometimes part way through, and in a couple of cases, not until close to the end of the mission. These bosses take a lot of damage, but aren't incredibly difficult to defeat, but your success at doing so will depend on how well you can survive the hordes of monsters surrounding the boss arenas as you try to get the upper hand. Chamberlain's journey takes him across a variety of arenas, from an abandoned mansion, to a crypt, to a haunted battlefield, and more. There really isn't any kind of connective tissue here from a narrative standpoint. Each arena exists to serve a purpose of variety amongst landscapes, providing fresh visuals and environments for each mission, which is great because it allows the developer to pull off some really neat tricks within those creative spaces, such as the train that rushes at you head on in the forest, or crossing the rooftops downtown, or the God, I had to go back and edit that out because some of these fucking levels have such unique twists and surprises that talking about them ahead of time only slightly lessens the impact of seeing them unexpectedly. Kids, I swear, I said, "What the fuck?" so many times in both shock and awe while playing this game that I honestly didn't think the game could surprise me anymore. And yet, even all the way to the finale, Kingdom of the Dead holds so many ace cards up its sleeves, revealing them one at a time with relish and effectiveness, that when the credits rolled, I was fucking floored. Absolutely floored. Kingdom of the Dead's campaign is solid, one that starts out with a kind of simplicity that had me worried for a minute, wondering, is this all there is? Only to see how genius all those building blocks were established in the beginning to make the rest of the game even more effective. As you can see from the visuals, Kingdom of the Dead has the look and feel of a black and white pulp comic book. You know, the lurid kind that mostly sit in the back of the comic store so the kids searching for Batman and Spider-Man don't have a heart attack when they pop one one open and see blood and guts in black and white. And to this effect, the game's story is told in that super minimalistic manner. All show with just enough words to make sure the player understands what's going on. And that's it, which is great because that's all it needs to be. Utilizing the visuals and leaning heavier on gameplay and mood instead of a deep narrative works to Kingdom of the Dead's benefit. It knows what it wants to do, how to do it, and by the end passes you the cigarette and asks if that was good for you. And kids, let me tell you, it was. Well, okay, except for a couple of things. But first, can we talk about these graphics? Fucking look, make no mistake, this game looks dead simple graphically with a black and white aesthetic that contains splashes of color to grab your attention to important objects, but let's be clear, this game is a fucking workhorse. A very demanding graphical workhorse that will require quite a bit out of your RAM and graphics card. While I didn't suffer any noticeable frame drops outside of a brief stutter here or there, I've read that some gamers have had difficulty running the game over 30 frames per second with lots of slowdown and stuttering. Not everyone has been experiencing this, but a few. Like I said, I had almost zero issues, and for the most part this game ran smooth as butter on my desktop. Meanwhile, when I record footage for the channel using Bandicam, most of the time I wind up with something like 100 to 200 gigabytes worth of video footage depending on the game. More graphically demanding games can take up to 400 gigabytes of space. When I was recording Rage 2, that nearly soaked up 500 gigabytes across 11.5 hours of footage. Kingdom of the Dead, 800 fucking gigabytes of footage for 8.5 hours of gameplay. That's nearly 100 gigs per hour. So yeah, this game is demanding and you'll want to adjust your settings accordingly. And yet it's evident where all that processing power is going just by looking at all this. Every single texture in the game was hand drawn, then meticulously put together in gorgeous black and white. Deep, dark, inky blacks and bold, bright, pearly whites. Light sources cast huge, looming shadows. Colored lighting from items and objects illuminate the world in distinct hues. The sheer amount of line work in each of the textures alone make this a rendering nightmare and an absolute beauty to gaze upon. Little touches like the glow of an enemy's eyes, which are different colors depending on the creature so you can tell them apart from afar, help keep a sense of orientation about you as you journey deeper through the missions. Sometimes, due to the harsh shadows and deep blacks and absence of light, it can be difficult to distinguish enemies from the environment, but this feels intentional rather than an unfortunate byproduct of the game engine. I was constantly on my toes scanning the horizons and hallways for monsters as they exploded through crumbling walls and doors, or sometimes burrowing up from beneath the dirt to ambush me. This, of course, means that you'll want to keep a weather eye out for those civilians. Finding them and freeing them is fairly easy, and you'll be able to tell who is who because they all have a red "do not shoot" symbol over their heads. But in tenser situations where you're checking corners and scrambling to stay alive due to the onslaught of monsters, you could find yourself pulling the trigger on sight and executing innocents rather than saving them. And on 3-star difficulty, that means mission failure, and you'll have to start all the way over if you want to clear that pathway. While the environments maintain a delightful sense of uniquity throughout the game, enemy design simultaneously plays it safe while also ensuring you'll be able to recognize the enemy types on sight as well. Zombies come in 3 flavors: swords, shotguns, and snipers. Sword zombies are bald and crawl on all fours towards you, while shotgunners wear a simple officer cap, and snipers have a cavalry hat. Even at a distance and in silhouette, you won't mistake who is who. Cultists are standard assholes in robes and hoods, shimmering with magical powers. What I think are devil dogs also run on all fours, but they come in groups and are usually accompanied by a massive berserker with an axe and a horned helmet which prevents headshots. Headshots. My god, headshots! The number of casual headshots I landed with the extraordinarily accurate weapons was ridiculous. Whether using the pistol, rifle, or the alt-fire on the Gatling gun, more on that in a second, headshots come fast and furious with patience and concentration. I got so many headshots so often that my gameplay experience felt like the negotiation scene in The Fifth Element.
Anybody else want to negotiate?
Meanwhile, other monsters like the floating orbs and the bowls will tank a lot of damage unless you take the time to aim for their glowing yellow eye, a subtle nod to being a weak point. Harpies dive bomb you from the skies, their black feathers melting into the night sky, and sometimes, if you're really unlucky, a mancubus type monster with cannons for arms will come lumbering your way. These all might feel familiar in their own way, but they also feel incredibly unique at the same time thanks to the art style. Watching monsters trundle towards me enemy felt like a fever dream drawn from the terrifying works of H.P. Lovecraft. You fucking racist piece of shit. And while you'll be able to dispatch enemies with ease for the most part, it should be noted that you too can be dispatched quite easily as well, at least in the beginning. At the start of every mission, you'll begin with 3 hearts for your health meter, a nice little Zelda-esque touch. And in similar fashion, you can find heart containers hidden throughout the missions, adding to your health. I was able to boost my health bar up to 7 hearts on one map, which was great because I absolutely needed each of them. Enemy hits can be devastating if they land in rapid succession, and if you get hit with an explosion or a fireball, you'll feel every single impact as it chips away at your health, sometimes laying waste to an entire heart container. Fortunately, our Agent Chamberlain is a nimble son of a bitch with a big floaty jump, excellent air controls that rival Doom Eternal, and responsive controls. Like most 90s shooters, Chamberlain has a brisk walk and a dedicated run button, so be prepared to press shift to run when you need to move fast. I was hopping, running, pausing, swapping through weapons like a goddamn acrobatic cowboy. I never felt like any of the many deaths that I took were unfair in the slightest. The game throws a lot at you, but also provides buttery smooth controls to handle yourself with, and plenty of firepower to make do. Which, finally, oh my god, yes, brings us to the arsenal. Fucking goddamn yes. There's nothing new here in terms of FPS gaming. Pistol, shotgun, rifle, Gatling gun, dynamite, and a rocket launcher. What sets them all apart is usage and alt fires. Every weapon in the game has an alt fire, which you'll want to familiarize yourself with. The pistol is primarily a single shot, but alt fire does a quick 3-shot fan. Shotgun fires both barrels by default, but alt fire is 1 barrel at a time. The rifle is a good old long-range accurate shot, but alt fire lets you use the bayonet on the end of it, just in case zombies are getting a little too familiar while you're trying to snipe the snipers and cultists from down the block. And the fucking Gatling gun! Christ. So I didn't put the alt fire to much use on the Gatling gun until deep in the game, because alt fire is just a single bullet, and that's all. Primary fire is standard chain gun style mayhem that will chew through enemies gleefully, but that single shot alt is just as accurate as the pistol and the rifle. So if you don't want to swap back and forth between weapons while surrounded by the horde, you don't have to. It does wonders when the bulls are charging you and you want to hit them in the eye for bonus damage but don't want to use the super slow rifle. The Gatling gun, to that extent, is incredibly OP, which might seem like a cheat, but when the enemies overwhelm you, it sure won't feel that way. The best you can do in this game is level the playing field, but the one weapon, which is the game changer here, is our little demon sword. So, primary attack is a vertical slice, alt fire a horizontal swipe. Sure, that's easy enough. Melee against most enemies feels like a poor idea and is confirmed on execution. But each time you kill an enemy with the sword, a little meter below its icon fills up. Once it fills all the way, it turns white and the sword glows with crackling electricity. At this point, once you've charged it, pressing alt fire releases a goddamn BFG blast of demonic energy that will utterly annihilate any common enemy on the board, and when used in conjunction with other weapons, will drop bosses faster than you can think about it. My tactic during the game was to take out some of the weaker zombies near the beginning of each mission to ensure I had a charged sword so that when shit got real, I got real right back. It is deadly, devastating, and definitely fun to use. You'll have to think quite a bit while using weapons, because there's no right or wrong way to attack with any of them. Pistol will secure a headshot just as well as a rifle, but your weapons fire slowly in accordance with the 1800s era technology, so discovering for yourself which weapons to use and when is absolutely key. I got into a great little dance where I would alt fire the shotgun, swap to the rifle, then back and forth while facing a horde of zombies, because swapping to another weapon to fire is quicker than waiting for the weapon in hand to ready itself again. Shoot, mouse wheel, shoot, mouse wheel. This game offers fantastic depth of combat utilizing unbelievably simplistic assets for maximum enjoyment. Of course, on lower difficulties, you won't be doing the Doom dance too much. If you're an FPS veteran, I highly recommend going straight into 3-star missions. On 2 stars and lower, the number and type of enemies coming your way is vastly lower compared to 3-star. I beat the game on 2-star for my first run, as I always go for the second highest difficulty when playing for the channel, but after doing so, I immediately wanted to clear those 3-star missions and get into the meat of it. Jesus fucking Christ. Enemies that didn't appear until the latter half half of the game on 2 stars, we're in the first fucking mission on 3 stars. 3 stars really, truly will make you work and sweat for each victory, juggling combat and exploration to find those secondary objectives, while also making sure you don't accidentally kill civilians. I was pressed. Not gonna lie, in my 8.5 hours of playing this game, the first 3.5 were going through on 2 stars, and the other 5 were on 3 stars. This shit fucking slaps and will make you work for those objectives. I haven't talked about boss fights much, because those, if and when you play this game, are best kept as surprises to find when you arrive at them. Much like the way some of the levels will offer crazy twists and visuals midway through, the bosses are more effective when you see them for the first time. But, depending on your mileage, they will either feel lackluster or just satisfying enough due to the atmosphere and presentation. Bosses will hit you hard, not gonna lie, but they are also mostly pushovers. A couple of them are more resilient than others, especially deeper into the game, but bosses are less like bosses and more like extra double-sized enemies with health bars that you can whittle away pretty quickly. It's all about the arenas and how the game makes you think about each boss and how they fit stylistically into the mission environments themselves. From a design and visual standpoint alone, these bosses are out fucking standing, and I enjoyed every single one of them. But if you're here looking for challenging bosses that'll make you sweat Icon of Sin style, then I'm afraid you might be disappointed. Kingdom of the Dead isn't about crafting a massive back-breaking challenge with boss fights, but is instead concentrated more on the mood and the atmosphere surrounding them. If you can get into that, you'll have a good time no matter how quickly they go down. Oh, and the sound design. Sweet Christmas, kids. The sound design is mwah. Audio is so good. Enemies moan and groan, chains clank and clingle, strange whispers simmer in the background. Hell, sometimes just random, strange, really fucking weird shit will make noises from nowhere just to fuck with you. In the forest, there was a section where I could hear crows overhead, and since it's the only time you ever hear anything like that, I was taken aback. Did that mean that there were harpies nearby? Nope, it just deepened the ambiance, which was unsettling to hear, something so normal in such a clearly haunted environment. Sometimes a strange horn will play in the distance, like it's, I don't know, like it's directing the monsters and letting them know I was there. I'm not even sure why or what it really was. It was just unnerving. It kind of reminded me of the foghorn from The Lighthouse. You'll hear fireballs coming your way, growing louder as they do, and if you're able to dodge them, you'll hear them in one ear or the other depending on where they are. Spatial audio really helps you keep track of where monsters are at, especially ones like the harpies who let out a death cry as they descend upon you, growing louder and louder as they approach. Weapon sounds could have been a little beefier, but again, taking into consideration of the 1800s firearms on display, I was fine with them not having as much heft as, say, a fucking Desert Eagle. They are all certainly serviceable and are noticeably punched up from the demo that I played back in October. Originally, the pistol sounded more like a cap gun in the demo, but now has a deeper echo to it, which makes it feel like an old-timey revolver. The fucking soundtrack. God Christ. Drawing from 80s horror cinema and no doubt owing a tip of the hat to Stranger Things, the soundtrack is synth heavy and reminds me a lot of early John Carpenter and Italian horror flicks. It switches tempos on the fly sometimes, keeping the music fresh. Sometimes tender and ominous, sometimes fast-paced in a manner reminiscent of 90s MIDI tunes, the score complements the pulpy comic visuals perfectly, again adding to a Lovecraftian sensibility which helps craft a deeply disturbing environment of tension and unease. There's really no way I can do justice to the soundtrack just by describing it, so have a listen to a couple of tracks and soak it in. So we've got fantastic gameplay and graphics, effective minimalistic narrative, unique and creative level design, sweat-inducing difficulty that is 100% fair. So what's a downside here? Well, as much as I hate to admit it, and I really don't want to because I really genuinely love this game and this experience, there are a few glaring bugs that hinder the game slightly, just enough to keep it from being a thorough 10 out of 10. While the glitches I experienced were, in fact, pretty rare, they stick out like sore thumbs. A few enemies spawn inside walls from which they can shoot at you, but you can't shoot them. I managed to lob a bundle of dynamite at a wall, which caused enough blast radius to knock the zombie out of the wall, but I couldn't replicate that. And then to make this glitch even worse, since I played through the game twice, I noticed that it's the same enemies in the same places that spawn in the same walls. So it isn't a random bug that occurs, it's a very specific glitch that is there and can make your life difficult. Another bug that happened, which nearly threw me out of the game deep into my 3-star playthrough, I completed a mission after having confidently secured the secondary objective for that level, but when I got to the end of the mission, it told me that I had failed because for some reason it hadn't registered that I'd picked up the item, even though I got the confirmation icon that I had, in fact, completed the objective when I picked up the item. I had to go back over my footage to actually double check, and lo and behold, there it was. I had secured the item. So I had to run back through the entire mission again just to pick up the item and push myself through the onslaught while not killing any civilians and hope that the bug didn't happen again. Now, of course, this happened to me only once. When I'd run this mission on 2 stars, I'd cleared the mission with the item and secondary objective checked off, but for some reason on 3 stars, it bugged out. On my second try, on 3 stars, I got the objective and finished the mission with the item registered, mission success, but that had soured me. I was nervous the rest of my 3 stars playthrough, worried that the game would bug out again and that I'd have to run the mission more than once just to get it to count. Adding to the stress of this is that you can't drop into missions at specific checkpoints, so I couldn't just go in and try it again midway through. I had to replay the entire thing. And 3 stars is no joke. I did not want to replay any of these missions, and yet I did more than once due to my own stupidity, accidentally killing civilians because I wasn't paying attention to the environment while trying to clear the room of monsters. There's some minor collision detection issues, and occasionally you might get stuck on an object you're trying to jump over, but nothing was game breaking and I was always able to get free. And sometimes if you die and reload at a checkpoint, the music will sometimes turn itself off and you'll be running around in silence until a new track is triggered by the mission. I think it happened at the end of the game too, because when I watched the credits for the first time, it was silent and I was in awe of how well that was crafted. But the second time I beat the game, the credits rolled with the main theme in the background, and it was kind of disappointing how less effective that was. When you're playing a game like this and it is this good, and then it has a couple of bugs that just fucking wave around a goddamn neon sign that screams, "This piece is broken," God, is it a shame, and it can bounce you out of the immersion. Hopefully developer Dirigo Games will be able to address those specific glitches, and if so, this game will truly be a contender for Game of the Year. God, I would love to hoist this up on a golden pedestal right now and proclaim it a true titan, and in most respects, it is. 3 stars will test your FPS skills. It will push your CPU and GPU, and it is cleverer than it has any right to be. But man, ending that mission on hard and being told I had missed the secondary objective after I knew I'd gotten it, and forcing myself to start it up again, man, that was frustrating. Especially since it felt so very specific, and yet very, very random at the same time. I love this game. Fucking love this fucking game. Just like with Vomitorium and Head on Bloodright, I was drawn into the craft and passion of Kingdom of the Dead. Every single aspect of this game is breathtaking, from the graphics and the aesthetics, to the combat and controls, to the story and simplicity of it all. Rarely do I get to experience a game that is so confident in the delivery of its world and presentation that it feels as though I'm entering that realm of specific magic from the 90s, where FPS games felt as though they were portals into completely new worlds and experiences. And yet, love this game though I do, there's just enough flawed about it that I can't quite give it the score that I want to give it. This being a game from a solo developer makes it so that there is more forgiveness than if it were a hugely budgeted corporate shooter. But when the bugs that do appear frustratingly affect gameplay the way they do, I have to take that into account. Kids, I've got my eyes peeled for Dirigo Games to put out some patches that address the specific issues listed here. I know a few other gamers have had some other glitches that I have not. Kingdom of the Dead is a game that deserves accolades and attention. flawed or not, and as such, I'm going to give it a score of 8.5 out of 10. God, this one caught me off guard and really hit the spot for me, kids. I'm going to be thinking about this one for a while to come, but for now, let's take a moment to remember that there is no such thing as a perfect game. Everything has got some flaws to it, and sometimes those flaws are just too much to be able to enjoy the package as a whole. And yet, sometimes a game is so magical that even with a few glaring errors, it still enchants and casts a thrall over players, and they deserve our support still. For now though, kids, I'm going to head out, as February has been a packed fucking month for indie releases, and I've got at least one other title that I need to get to work on. Remember to stay hydrated, and when the fire alarm goes off while you're cooking steak, don't panic. Just open a window and fan the fire alarm until it stops beeping and get that food off the heat. Stay safe out there, kids. See you next time.